back again to Watercolor 42, and today I'm going to be doing a picture. I started out, I usually start out, pencil. I do it in pencil. Then a lot of times I'll go over it a little bit with a marker, kind of outlining it. And then it almost looks like a coloring book type of thing. And then I have to decide what colors I want to fill it in with. Now, usually I start off, if I'm doing an outdoor picture, I usually start off using probably the blue. And I usually, for the sky, I usually put a little bit of a watercolor wash in, and then add some color into that. I kind of do it so I don't end up with too many strong, brush strokes on the paper. So I make my sky usually kind of soft, and the clouds I try to make the edges a little bit soft occasionally, for the most part. And so now here's the thing. I just sketched this morning over to I call it Nobbycraft Park. It's right next door to Nobbycraft on North Main Street, and it's a nice little area in there. It used to be a little playground for the local children in the neighborhood, and but now it's kind of overgrown a bit. But it's still a nice spot to paint from any kind of angle, whether you want to put houses in or the bridge and this water that runs through there. So. The 10 Mile River, and it's right next door. Well, it's across the street from Blackington Inn. So it's a nice little spot. It's they do have some benches there, and with the table, and so it seemed to be a relatively quiet area for someone that just wants to sit there and relax, or like in my case and my friend Tom today, we were out there painting and sketching and so forth. So it turned out to be a pretty good day. They're talking about rain later on, but we didn't have that problem. And so now I'm going to start off. I usually use a marker and go over my lines so things show up a little bit on the TV. So sometimes when I do a drawing, I want the lines to show up a little bit more. Now, okay, here we go. Now, you can use any straight edge that you may have. You can use another pencil if you want, or you can use a ruler. So I'm just going to go over some of the lines. Today, I'm going to be using the pencil. Now, ordinarily, I probably would start off using a marker. Make sure it's a permanent marker so that when you do add the water, it's not going to blur. Okay? So now, this picture has some buildings in the background. You've got the 10 Mile River that runs across here and whatnot. And we had some little friends visiting with us today, some of the geese or ducks or whatever who were on the pond, on the water. So anyway, now I'm going to put in, go over some of my lines. Hopefully they'll show up with pencil, okay? That's a little bit darker than what we have. And I'll just go over some of these lines quick. I hope they show up better on TV. That's the problem. Sometimes you don't like to use a marker too much because sometimes the marker might be a little bit heavy, some of the lines. I like my lines to vary a little bit if I can. I'm just going to indicate where a window goes there. So this is one building. I'm going to put a little, it might be something in the background that's like a garage over there. So we'll put another, it could be a shed also in the background. So I'll make that a little bit darker. And then over here, we'll put a third something. Now, I'm always emphasizing uneven numbers, 1, 3, 5, whatever, rather than I think that the worst thing you can do sometimes is two of something. So a lot of times if you're doing a plant, you end up with something that looks like, you know, the little rabbit ears. But if you add a third something to it, it kind of makes it look a little bit more interesting if you have an uneven number. So I always do it same way with buildings, you know, 3 buildings, 5 buildings, whatever it might be. Not that you're going to sit back and count all the objects in the painting, but I tend to do it that way. Now, what's happening here, we got the buildings up on the banking, and then what we also have is the water line. So that's going to be down here somewhere. Now, when you do the water, you know, you want to make sure it doesn't go uphill or downhill. So you try to get this line across. No matter what kind of water it is, whether it's a pond or a lake or whatever. This happens to be part of the 10-mile river that runs through here. Goes across the road there. And so I'm just going to put a line in for that. Now, I can draw freehand some of the rocks and boulders that might be in the foreground. So I'm just going to go over some of the rocks and the boulders that we have that are down in the foreground. So we're dealing with foreground, you know, the middle ground, and then the background. So we'll just put some of that in to kind of make it look kind of bumpy. Now, off over to the side, what there is a weeping willow tree. It overlaps over the water a bit, and that's coming out of here. I just show where the trunk of that goes. But the weeping willow is just going to be all these the branches that kind of droop over, and it looks like it's weeping, doesn't it? It's kind of bent down, and we'll just put some markings in for that. I hope some of this is showing up on TV. Now, we got a lot of bushes and trees. We got some in the foreground, and some are going to hide some of the house, quite a bit of the house actually. Now, this whole subject changes, you know, by the seasons. Sometimes if you're out there in the fall, of course, you're getting the leaves, you know, dropping off the trees, and you're getting a lot more color. So if you do a summer picture, though, you're picking up a lot of green. We've got quite a bit of green. Now, there's trees that up and back here, way up and back, and then you got some things coming up in here in the foreground. We're just going to put some grass in here in the foreground. I'm exaggerating. Actually, they cut the grass pretty short, but I'm going to just kind of use that for a filler. Now, let's bring this line across here a little bit more. The water goes off and back. Actually, as you look around, like a panoramic view, there's a nice little waterfall, and there's a little bridge that goes across to the opposite shore from here. Now, I hope you know where this place is located. If you live in Attleboro, you're probably familiar with it. We're certainly familiar with Blackington Inn, which is across the street. And then you got the bridge, Memorial Bridge, and then there's a flag, so forth. But that's a little further over to your, in this picture, it would be over a little bit further to the right. So you got a lot of filling in to do with trees and so forth. Like I said, this time of year, there's a lot of green out there. We've had more green this summer than usual. Now, across the water, as I mentioned, we were out there earlier in the day, so it's in the morning early, everything looks just the water's sort of muddy. But as the sun comes up a little higher in the meridian, then the water reflects the blue sky, and so the water becomes a little bit blue. There's a lot of little lily pads that would be growing out there. Now, I try to minimize the amount of, the amount of water, the amount of drawing that I do in water and so forth that I put in the picture. So that's pretty well set. And I finished most of the picture by painting it in. Now, a lot of times, if you want to correct something, I always bring this little tube of acrylic paint, acrylic white, and that's good for touching up. You know, if you put a line in or something, you make a mistake, you just hide it with this white. They have a Chinese white watercolor, but the problem with that, it's not opaque enough and it doesn't hide some of the darker, you know, markings that you might put on your paper. So anyways, now, I usually start off with the biggest brush I can find, and it's usually like a 1-inch flat across the point there. And we'll start off with a little bit of blue and put that in there. Also, you can wet the paper ahead of time. You can just dash some water in there and just wet the paper. And usually if I'm working outside, I always start from the top and work down. The kind of the brightness of the day, the sky and so forth sort of sets the kind of the tempo for everything else. Okay. Now this is primarily water. Just putting some water up there. And if you paint with a big brush, you can paint kind of loose, you know. You don't have, hey, if you go over a line here and there, you know, it's not the end of the world. So, you know how years ago they said, oh, stay within the lines, the coloring books, but, you know, you don't have to do that so much. Now, what I'm doing here is it's just getting more blue into the water, so the blue's going to be a little bit darker. It's more noticeable now. I have a bad habit of being too cautious sometimes, and when I look at my picture the next day, everything, that next morning, you know, everything's had a chance to dry out, and usually you have to rework your colors, make certain areas darker. Okay, fill this in here. Okay. Now, if you wanted clouds in the sky, you can take a paper towel and you can just blot the area and just pat the towel in there and make sort of soft clouds. But in this case, I might want to go a little bit darker with the blue. I'm being overly cautious. See how that works? The upper meridian is always a lot brighter and darker. And as you come down looking through the atmosphere, everything sort of gets fuzzier, pale. So this is what we're doing, getting some of that in there. Now, remember I mentioned earlier in the day the water looks very dark and very muddy? Well, as the sun comes up during the course of the day, all that muddy color or dark brown or whatever it might be, lightens up. So I put some of that water in there across here. Today the water was like a mirror, you know, it was very still until it got to the little waterfall, and then that kind of erased the water a little bit, and it was moving pretty fast after it got over the fall. Here we go, get that in there. Now, when you're painting with a big brush, you can cover a lot of territory in a hurry. Now, what we have here, where we've got some blue in across there, and you can keep working this, you know, build up layer upon layer, so forth. And but now I'm going to, seeing that I'm working with blue, why not we take a little bit of the yellow, mix it on the palette here, and you combine some of this yellow with the blue. It's supposed to turn more of a greenish color. So right across the bottom here, we could start putting in some dashes of the green grass, okay? Again, now I didn't wet this down here because grass has a little bit more texture, so you can make it a little bit bumpier. Okay, I'm being overly cautious with the green. Now, while we were working with the green, and I'm still hanging on to the big brush, as long as I can, I'm just going to put some of that green up into here. And I'm a real dabber. I dabble a lot. I'm a dabber. And excuse me, you can come across here. Actually, you can hardly see the house, really. It's all filled in, but I'm letting the house show through more than it actually showing through out there today. Actually, the house is almost covered in with all the leaves in the foreground, filled in. We've had more rain this summer, so everything seems to have greened up quite a bit. Here we go. Go through here. I'm going to leave a little bit of of this building showing through out in here. This can go up a little higher. I can go up into there, but the sky's still a little bit wet. The blue's still a little bit wet. So we'll just dabble around through here a bit. And over here, this is going to be the weeping willow tree. So I suppose you could use the edge of the brush and kind of fill it in. You know, the brush strokes can kind of droop a little bit. And I'm working very, very lightly. I'm being overly cautious, probably. But now we'll finish up across through here. This is quite a bit of green. Okay. Now you can vary the shade. The light source is coming in from my left, so everything on the left side can be a lot brighter yellow, yellowish green, if you will. And then what's on the right side of everything, the trees and whatnot, and bushes and things, can be in the shadow. But so we can keep it lighter out in here. This is the weeping willow tree. It kind of droops down. Let's use the edge of the brush for that. I just keep it loose. They use that term a lot, like fluid, you know, keep it fluid, wet, and whatnot. And I guess I'm notorious for being loose and very fluid with when I paint. Now, if you want to get a little darker in a hurry, what I use is that Payne's Gray. Put a little bit of that in your green, and you can get a darker shadow in a hurry. And that's going to be on what would be the right side, for me anyway. It's my right side. And all that can be worked in. Along the banking here, a lot of this is going to be in the shade, very shady. That's another thing to keep in mind. When you're doing sometimes a painting, you want to make sure that you're in the shade and your paper's in the shade, and you're looking out, for the most part, into the light area. But if the sun's beating down on your paper, it's going to dry faster, it's probably too fast. But if you work with a larger brush, you can't get too fussy, and it forces you to kind of be more spontaneous when you paint. And it seems like lately I'm getting a little bit more spontaneous than what I used to do. My style, you know, is changing somewhat. Now, let's see if we can work along this edge over here a little bit. We can really get in the shadows back here because you've got all those trees that are overhanging. And you know the edge of the water, you know how some people make it a little bit too straight and too smooth? Well, that could be a little bit bumpier along the bank. You don't have to stay that tight with the edge. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm not kind of getting too tight with that. The water today was like a mirror out there though. But because we were painting a little bit earlier, the sun hadn't quite got up above the trees yet. So it looked a little bit on the dark side out there. Yeah, you stick with the big brush as long as you can. A lot of times what people do, they have a lot of paintbrushes, and they're small brushes. They're about all the same size. The numbers, you know, the numbers go, you know, from 3, 4, 5. The larger the number, the larger the brush is. So some people have a whole bunch of brushes that are probably the same size, and obviously they do the same thing. You know, the number 5 brush is going to, no matter what brand it is, it's still a number 5. So it's going to do the same thing. So I kind of stick with the lately I've been sticking with the big brush as long as I can. Okay, I know there was a lot of trees that were hiding the house there in back. If you're doing something in back, you have to make sure that line isn't bumpy, because if it's bumpy, it looks like the tree's in front of the house rather than in back of it. So you keep that kind of clean across there. And then the upper part, then you can kind of loosen up on the brush strokes. Here we go, something like that. Now I'll work on this and dabble around until it kind of looks okay, and I can let it set up a little bit to dry. And then while I'm letting some of this dry out, let's fill in some of this. You can leave some white spots in there if you want. They call them windows, where you see through the branches of the tree a little bit. No? Okay, I'm just going to fill in some of these white spots. I know there's not that much across here. It's pretty much of a solid kind of green color. Now, if I'm getting too much green in here, I can always come back and I can wet the paper, take a paper towel, clean spot on the towel hopefully, and just blot some of that out. Now, I'm going to leave this alone for a minute. Let some of that dry out. I think I've got it pretty well filled in, somewhat. With watercolor, you can always add something. There's always something that you can put in, and sometimes it's a lot harder to take it out than it is to be able to put it in. So that's why sometimes you want to lay back a little bit and don't get too carried away with all the fussy stuff, because you may still want to leave it that way and not make it too fussy. I'm just kind of bumping up the edge here across that part. Now, let's do the foreground. Let's make it a little bit more lighter yellowish color. Even the grass has stayed green this summer. You know how some years when the grass is kind of dried out quite a bit? Well, not this year. Go right across here. And I usually put tape around the edge to make a false mat around the paper. So I make sure I paint right to the edge, get that filled in. Because when you pull the tape off, it's going to look kind of bumpy there if you don't. Okay, get some of that filled in here. Okay. Now you can, like I said, you can make this a lot more yellowish color. Just make it a little bit. And even on the sunny side of the trees, you know, you can put some more yellow on the sunny side, make it a little lighter. That's one thing about watercolor. You can always come back and kind of wet the paper and rework it a bit. What I like about watercolor too, it dries fast enough so you don't have a wet canvas or paper to take home. Usually dries out pretty fast. Yeah, let's put a little bit more yellow in it. Down across here and also across here. There you go. Now, I never, when I paint, I never work, you know, I never finish one little corner and then work out of a corner or work and finish one little area. You notice that what I do when I paint, I'm jumping around a lot. You know, I'll paint a little bit, maybe this corner, and then I'll go over here. And I'm always thinking of the total composition, not isolating any particular area. I don't know if everybody paints that way, but that's this is just what I do. Not just what I do, probably what a lot of people do. Jump around a bit more. Okay, there's some pretty flowers that were growing in there too. I like that idea. Okay, now what we have to do is at some point kind of let the paper dry out a bit, because what I'll probably introduce is some of the barks on the tree. Now you can take your brush, pinch it out, and use the brush like a sponge. And let's say if I want to show a limb or a branch or something, I can actually keep working the paper until I kind of expose an area. Now, some people put masking tape down. They put little strips of tape down, and then they kind of clean that area out and make some of the trunk of the tree show up more. I usually let it dry a bit and just kind of go into it with a brown marker or whatever color you want to use for the bark on the tree. Trees aren't really, the bark is usually a grayish, off-color gray or bluish. It's not really kind of brown. We got in the habit of using brown a lot because usually in school your crayon box had brown in it, and that was the closest color to what we considered maybe the wood of the tree type of thing. But when you really look at the wood on trees, it really doesn't have brown in it. It's gray and everything else, different shades in it anyways. So here we go. See how much area I've kind of filled in already. Now, sometimes I spend a lot of time talking about certain things, and what I'm doing is letting the paint dry. Let the paint dry a little bit, let it set up. Now, I've got another little building off here, but I don't know if I want to have that. I could kind of fill that in back here and maybe hide that somehow. Okay, now everything looks a little bit flat right now. So what I'm going to do, whether I stick with a large brush or I can go to one that's slightly smaller, we could use this. This is a round, has a nice point to it. So now, if I want, I can take some of my my Payne's Gray, and I'm just going to hit some of the rocks. We'll just put some little paint on some of the upper edge of the contours of some of the boulders, the rocks along here, through here. And I can take a piece of material, plastic or whatever I have, and I can kind of scrape that a bit. Now, some of these brushes purposely have like a little scraper. So you take that and pull that paint around and scratch through it and kind of bring out some of the excuse me, the texture. Okay? So I'm just going to go across here, coloring some of the boulders. Again, I probably, I'm working kind of a little bit ahead of time. You really should let things kind of dry a bit more. But we only have about 20 minutes left of our clock here. So I have to put certain things in. And just be careful on not getting too much paint where I'm not supposed to. Okay. I'm just kind of putting some color in here. You may have some green still on your brush, so you have to be careful. You don't get too much of that green into the color of the stones. Okay, just across the bottom here a little bit. Okay. Now what's happening here, I'm getting a little bit too much of the green in there. So what I have to do, I come back, I can take some of that out and kind of put more highlight on the rocks. Yeah. I don't want that to be that green. Okay, over here, we can kind of darken that up a little bit. See what we got. Okay. Just paint this in a little bit more. All right. Yeah, you can bring the rocks right down. They kind of go right along the edge here. Now, if things aren't coming out as well as they should, what we have in the foreground, you have a lot of bushes. And we had a lot of bushes coming up into here on this side, and we had a lot over here, over on this side. Fill that in a bit. Come up into here. Fill that in the foreground. I'm going to take this out here. Okay. I'm going to erase some of that there. All right, now, let's see. We had quite a few little bushes on the background there. Let's see what we got. Put some more of that in there. Now, somewhere, where's that? Oh, here it is. Hiding. We got this little brush here. And what I'm going to be doing is hopefully Some of this is going to be drier, so now I can put some more texture into this, I hope, without it getting too messed up. Some of the trees in the background, you'll see some of the branches coming up, going up into here. Now that doesn't always have to be straight either. You can kind of vary a little bit some of the texture and pull some of that out of there. But you want to show some of the trunks of the trees coming up through all of that. Okay. Something a little bit. Okay. Now what's happening here is still the background's a little bit too wet. So you have to let it set up a little bit more. You get the idea of more of the trunks of the, and the branches of the trees. Okay, now, see what we got here. I do have, or I had one somewhere. Maybe some of that, we'll use some of this color. Get some other color into the picture here. Okay. All right. Want to get some more color of the trees in here. What we got is a lot of green. Okay. Now you can show a little bit of the windows. I guess you put some windows in here, just a little bit. And what I do when I put the windows on, I make them a little bit elongated, so that they don't. If you put the windows in too short a line, they start to look like a dot. So you want to make the windows a little bit elongated when you put them in. They show up a little bit better. All right. Do some more of the foreground here. They had a lot of branches in here. It was really loaded. Okay. Kind of dabble around in here. Okay. You get the idea of it. Now, what I'm going to do a little bit more of too, I'm going to put some more. The water looks kind of light, so let's get some more. Maybe get a little darker shade of blue into here. Put some of that in there. That water today was almost like a mirror. Came across like a mirror. Maybe get some more color there. Whoops. You know, I like blue, but not that much. Yeah, a little bit there. And I think we could pick up a little on the edge here. Just show a little bit of the water off here. Okay. Whoops, daisy. spread that around. There. Now, this is up to you, the one painting sometime. Now, if your sky needs a little bit more oomph to it, you can be careful with it and put a little bit deeper blue in the sky, especially up near the top. Oh gosh, I'm getting too much green on everything today. Oh, that's better. There you go. Put a little deeper blue right across that top edge. There you go. Now, you know what's going to happen here? I think I'm going to have to kind of let it dry out a little bit more, and maybe what I do sometimes, I use my markers, and let's see if I can put something in there. The bag open. You could use your markers, and let's see what I can do with this. Put this along the edge. Okay, now, how much more we have to do? What I've got to do is let it dry out a little bit more, and we can put in some of the finishing touches. I think probably what we did, we overdid the green a little bit much, and we put more texture in the, it's supposed to be a weeping willow tree, but it's not weeping too much. So we have to kind of, we'll doctor that up a little bit more, and whatnot. Now along here, I got to bring out more of the rocks texture, you know, along through here, and whatnot. But the shadow side, do more of that. I think I got too much green into it though. Gives the house a little bit more color. Back here, maybe add a little bit of shading in there. Now, one of the big factors is letting certain areas dry out a little bit more. You know, sometimes if you don't let certain things dry and you try to paint into it, it's going to just kind of spread out. It's not going to hold its shape very well. It's going to fade into your paper. You want to make sure you're all set on the edges. I kind of jump around a little bit. When I paint. Okay. Well, nevertheless, so what we have to make sure we do, we're going to let this dry out, and what I normally do is just put this false, sort of a false mat on, and use the width of the tape. You have to be just careful you don't mess up the surface of your watercolor paper. And come down the side here. Oh. Okay. I think today we looked at a lot of green out there. And there were some other colors. There was sort of a purplish color flower that was very pretty. I don't know if I can make the thing show up right now because the paint is a little bit too wet, but that gives you an idea. Now, here we go. This has to be touched up a little bit more through here. I was getting too much green. I think instead of getting more Payne's gray. But I just wanted to borrow this one for a second up here. This was another one from one of Tom's photographs. And what I had in here was an area that was too much of the grass. So what I'm trying to do with it is to fill it in and make this here look more like a pond, a little pool of water. So I'm going to go into this a little darker with the blue, just to make that show up more, and fill this in. Kind of pull that out a little bit. Now the back of the pond, you want to keep that kind of flat, and we'll come out towards the foreground. And what I thought would be a good idea is to put some of the grass in front of that. So we'll put in the water, get that in there. And what we could do is make this a little bit more like water through here. Just pull some of that out. I use the brush a lot of times like a sponge. We'll take some of this out of here. Pull it around. And we talked about probably putting some maybe some taller grass or something in the foreground. Now I think we can use this one okay. We were thinking about putting some more grass, just sort of a little bit in the foreground. You kind of pull that out around here, around the edges. I don't know if that's going to make much of a difference, but you have to kind of let that dry a bit more. But maybe it could be built up in through here. Fill that in more, and kind of pull that out in through here a little bit more. You want to, if you use that particular shade of green or blue, you want to repeat it somewhere else in your painting. Okay. See, that kind of makes it look a little bit different. But I had that field of too much yellow there, green grass, yellow area. So it's just water, make it look more like a pond in there. Okay, it gives you a little bit more of a different view of it, you know. Okay, well, anyhow, if I want to put, whether I dare to put anything else up in here or not, I'm not sure. I know probably this could be a little bit stronger through here, the tree in the foreground. Put some more color into it to build it up. Okay? Or a little bit more touch up. So that changes that one a little bit. So sometimes, you know, it takes a little bit of touch up And a lot of times you can add a little bit more to the picture. You don't have to, if you've got an empty spot, you can always fill it in with something. I use a fence post or whatever it might be, some more bushes or whatever. And you can build it up a little bit more if you think it needs a little bit more oomph to it, okay? So that helps that, maybe that helps that, I hope. This one here, I think I have to let it dry a bit more, and it's just predominantly, I got too much green into it. So I got to rework that a little bit more. But that's basically the idea of that, the way to go about probably painting it in. But my style has changed a little bit more. And I'm just blotting it, make it dry faster. So that one needs a little bit more touch-up, okay? That one needs a touch-up. This one probably, maybe a little bit more work to that. But I'm going to let it set, let it dry out and see what happens. I know it's going to be, you know what? I think actually, if that's going to be that blue, I think I'm going to put a little bit more blue across the sky. Right up in here. We can make that a little bit darker in here. And kind of pull that down a bit. I don't know if that's going to kind of counterbalance things or not. You know, bring that in here more. That would give you a little bit more contrast in the sky. It probably could use that, you know. But a lot of times you have to experiment with your picture and see what you can do with it. What it might need. Ooh, that looks better, I think. I think that looks better there. So perk it up a bit, okay? So I'm running out of time today, a little bit. So you know how I always end my show. I say, okay, folks, I'm pretty well finished up, so brushes up, and we'll see you next week, okay? Or next time you put us on the TV, channel 15, okay?